Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our third evening session on Bhagavad Gita overview for Bhakti Shastri. Thank you for attending. Let us chant some prayers to begin with. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Shatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. Yes, so thank you again for attending. We appreciate your interest. We must get some figures from our team managers, how many devotees are attending. But I know in Russia, we have, what is it? I think 260 something are attending. Yeah, which is nice. It's nice to see the devotees utilizing the facility, so to speak. So devotees, yes, last night, we really started getting into Bhagavad Gita, into the first chapter. And we got as far as verse 8. It is our goal, or not exactly goal, but just we're keeping an eye on things in such a way that every evening we do 8 or 9, maybe 10 verses, something like that, because we have 6 days to do the first chapter. We've already completed 2. So we have 4 more days. And we did 8. And there are 46 in the chapter, so there's 38 to go in 4 days. Means plus or minus 9 verses an evening. And like I said, we're not trying to keep it exactly to that, because in some cases there are places in the discussion where the discussion naturally changes, and therefore it would be suitable to conclude for an evening at a place like that. Yes, so anyway, we'll keep going, keep an eye on these things, but not worry about it too much. So there we were then, in the section where Duryodhana, the king of the Kurus, effectively is diplomatically talking with Dronacharya, who is the head of his army, and Bhishma, who is the most senior in his army, and various others have gathered also. So he's speaking with them in such ways that hopefully, at least he feels hopefully, they'll feel encouraged to fight. And he is an expert. He's an expert in diplomacy, negotiation, and all that sort of thing. And so it is working. We finished last night at the end of verse 8. So we'll go on to verse 9 now. Hare Krishna Maharaj, welcome, Suswagatam. So we'll go on to verse 9. And yeah, the same discussion is continuing, actually. So he's named a whole, well, not a whole lot, but just a number of some of the main heroic warriors in his army, Duryodhana. And So now in verse 9, let me just read it. There are many other heroes who are prepared to lay down their lives for my sake. All of them are well equipped with different kinds of weapons, and all are experienced in military science. So, Srila Prabhupada gives a purport. It's a short purport, really quite a short purport. And there Srila Prabhupada brings out an interesting point that Duryodhana, having said that there's so many heroes, there's just loads and loads and loads of them. It's not just the several or so he's mentioned by name, there are plenty. So they're prepared to lay down their lives for his sake. He's sort of boasting, even, you could say. Srila Prabhupada makes the point in the purport, just right in the middle of the purport, that in other words, verse 9, and Duryodhana says that all these warriors, so many, really vast numbers, they're all ready to lay down their lives for him. Srila Prabhupada, we read, makes the comment that, in other words, it is already concluded that all of them would die in the battle of Kurukshetra for joining the party of the sinful Duryodhana. So yes, that's there. I want to just read to you just a few sentences, 3 or 4 or 5, from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on this verse. It's an interesting point. Listen to this. They are willing to give up their lives in order to help me. This is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur speaking. This is the intended meaning of Duryodhana, although the literal meaning is they have given up their lives. You get the odd case here and there in Bhagavad Gita of someone saying something and their intention is to say a particular thing, but in fact, by some transcendental, the activities of the transcendental Saraswati, they end up really saying something else. So the literal meaning, he says, is that they have already given up their lives. And then he says, actually, however, Krishna will later say, Mayai vaite nihata purvam, evam nimitta matram bhavasavyasachin. These warriors have already been killed by me before the war has started. You be my instrument, O Arjuna. That's Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, verse 33. So Vishwanath Chakravarti, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, thus, the literal meaning of Duryodhana's words are thus completely true. Interesting. And I assume Srila Prabhupada was noting that when he made his comment. Otherwise, it appears to just be a sort of, I don't know, a kind of unusual comment. So, devotees, those of you who are doing Bhakti Shastri, I have to tell you now, we have a special question here, right at this point. The special question, listen to this, so it's based on verse 9, which we just read. And our devotees have quoted a purport from Srimad Bhagavatam 4:25-25. 4:25 purport. Prabhupada says, every living entity is a hero in two ways. When he is a victim of the illusory energy, he works as a great hero in the material world, as a great leader, politician, businessman, industrialist, etc., and his heroic activities contribute to the material advancement of civilization. Excuse me. One can also become a hero by being master of the senses, a Goswami. Material activities are false, heroic activities, whereas restraining the senses from material engagement is great heroism. Okay, all right. So please note that, because you're going to have to look it up and just make sure you've got what is said there. Bhagavatam 4:25. So what's the question then? Well, the point is, in the purport we just read, there are two types, or every living entity is a hero in two ways, or maybe one of two ways, but anyway, there are two ways of being a hero. One is false, and one is real, great heroism. One is false, but one is real. So you are going to have to answer which is which is the false heroism, which is the real, the great heroism. So you note that, please, for your tests, exams as they come up. All right, so we move on to verse 10. And let's see. Our strength is immeasurable, and we're perfectly protected by grandfather Bhishma, whereas the strength of the Pandavas, carefully protected by Bhima, is limited. So there's a point here. There's a couple of points, actually. So Duryodhana, as usual, he's being diplomatic, and he's encouraging Bhishma by comparing him with Bhima, who's on the other side. And Prabhupada in the purport actually makes the point that Bhima is just not as powerful as Bhishma at all. Prabhupada says Bhima is like a fig in the presence of Bhishma. And Prabhupada says Duryodhana was always envious of Bhima because he knew perfectly well that if he should die at all, he would only be killed by Bhima. And yes, well, that's what happens in due course. That's what happened. So now a point made here particularly by Srila Baladev Vijabhushan, is that the word which has been translated as immeasurable, aparyaptam, immeasurable, and then paryaptam, as is translated as limited. Baladev Vijabhushan gives the understanding that Bhishma, when he hears it, aparyaptam and paryaptam, aparyaptam in relation to to his army or even particularly himself, and Paryaptam, the Pandavas and particularly Bhima. So he takes it as being immeasurable. But our Acharya says that actually this word, as is the case with quite a number of Sanskrit words, has another significant meaning. They're generally words which have multiple meanings. They have meanings sort of on different levels. Some are important, some are not, some are just very, only to be used under very special circumstances. In this case, there are two fairly normal uses of this word or these two words. So for Bhishma, it means immeasurable. But to Duryodhana, aparyaptam means insufficient. Insufficient. Whereas the Pandavas headed or including Bhima, their strength is paryaptam, sufficient. Interesting little twist there. Yes, so we move on again to verse 11. Now Duryodhana is addressing, the whole army actually, at least all the main ones assembled there, but it's also said that he's addressing everyone. Sure, and there's a lot of them there. There's millions and tens of millions, but anyway, that's what's said. So he's trying to encourage everyone that you all have important roles to play, so they all feel enlivened and inspired and enthusiastic to fight. He does mention that support Bhishma, because Bhishma, at this point, he's an old man. And any of us here who are old men, anyone over 65 or something, you know what it's like. There's no way someone at that stage of life is going to be able to fight so vigorously with people who are like 20s, 30s, that sort of age group. So in order to just encourage Bhishma in a certain way, a little different way from what he's been saying before, to encourage him in the sense that, don't worry, we're looking after you. We've got your back here, so you don't need to panic. So he says, you must give your full support to grandfather Bhishma. Yeah, so now Bhishma feels protected. He feels safer. And Prabhupada explains, Bhishma might become engaged in the battle and fully engaged on one side, then others may come up from some other side. And for someone who's younger and more alert and just in tune, they may be able to deal with that, but someone who's older and more kind of fixed in their ways, it may be more difficult. Yes. So, and Prabhupada mentions that he was confident, and he's giving real inspiration to these two because they were present at that gambling match where the attempt was made to disrobe Draupadi. But they said nothing. The only one who said something was Vikarna. who didn't appreciate the obvious immorality and sort of low class, very low class aspect of the whole thing. So now he's confident that they're with him, but he's been saying all these things over the last few verses also just to make sure, to drive it home so that they're really with him. And Prabhupada refers to the attempt to undress Draupadi there. You know, you may know the story. Let me just tell you a little part of it. Well, when Dushasana was trying to pull the sari off the body of Draupadi, you know, of course, it's a bit of a long story, but Lord Krishna incarnated as an endless sari. And even Dushasana, who was extremely powerful Kshatriya, he became exhausted after pulling and pulling for too long. He couldn't manage it any longer. So in this way, Krishna protected Draupadi. That event has its roots, according to Mahabharata, in the Rajasuya sacrifice of Yudhisthira, Maharaj Yudhisthira, when Krishna killed Shishupal. Again, we won't go into the details, but Shishupal was insulting and insulting and insulting Lord Krishna, and eventually it reached the point where Lord Krishna decided that's it. And he pulled out his Sudarshan chakra and very quickly and threw it. It was just blindingly fast and decapitated Shishupal. And Mahabharata describes that as he was doing this so fast, and Sudarshan chakra is so sharp, it's sharper than diamonds that have been sharpened. Krishna cut his finger. The paraphernalia of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yeah. So again, sort of, you know, sometimes it happens that people make, you know, they say the wrong thing spontaneously, or they do the wrong thing. So it was a spontaneous action on his part, and it was a spontaneous mistake. And as Prabhupada says here, indirectly by the symbolism of the conch shell, he informed his depressed grandson Duryodhana that he had no chance of victory in the battle, because the Supreme Lord Krishna was on the other side, and the conch is Krishna's, you know, one of his favorite symbols, items of paraphernalia. And Prabhupada mentions that actually Duryodhana is depressed, aparyaptam. It's limited. Our strength is limited. Yeah. So, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan, they both say that Bhishma is actually feeling inspired now. In other words, the diplomacy of Duryodhana has worked. And they say that he, you know, he's kind of in an unusual state of consciousness. He wants to hear Krishna blow his conch shell. So anyway, all the warriors on that side, they blow their conch shells, and as verse 13 says, the combined sound was tumultuous. So devotees, this brings us into another part here, another subsection actually, There are two main sections in this first chapter. The first section goes from the beginning up till, it's around verse 26, 27. And there are three subsections. Here now is the second subsection in which Krishna and Arjuna blow their conch shells. And that, of course, makes a great impact on Duryodhana and company. And it leads up to Arjuna asking Krishna to take his chariot in between the armies to see who's there, meaning, of course, trouble is brewing. So, okay, let's go on now into the second subsection in chapter 1. So, on the other side, both Lord Krishna and Arjuna, who were stationed on a great chariot drawn by white horses, sounded their transcendental conch shells. And Prabhupada mentions in the purport there that the sound was just so powerful, being transcendental, that it indicated clearly there was no hope of victory for the Kurus. Yes, so Krishna and Arjuna blow their conch shells, and let's just read. Srila Prabhupada makes a comment, not here, but in a class on these verses, which he gave in Bhaktivedanta Manor, actually, 1973. Prabhupada says, Krishna and his devotee Arjuna are on the same platform. Therefore, Madhava and Pandava blew their transcendental conch shells. This is not ordinary. Arjuna, as Krishna's associate, is equally powerful. Nobody can be an associate of Krishna without being very, very advanced. Just like fire can mix with fire, similarly, water can mix with water. Similarly, unless one is transcendentally advanced, he cannot be an associate of Krishna. They equally they're on the same platform. They're equally powerful in a certain sense. Baladev Vijayabhushan makes a comment here. Although the others were also standing in their chariots, Krishna and Arjuna are particularly mentioned in this regard to indicate the special nature of the chariot given by Agni himself, which had great power and could conquer the three worlds. Agni had given the chariot, the quiver of arrows, and horses to Arjuna. And he had given, would you believe, devotees, he had given Krishna a chakra before he, Agni, devoured the Pandava forest. That's another pastime. It's not so well known, perhaps. But all these things were given by Agni to Arjuna, and the chakra was given to Krishna before he devoured the Pandava forest. And Indra also had given the Devadatta conch shell, which was the conch shell of Arjuna, I think. Anyway, somebody's conch shell had been given by Agni Who is it now? It says here. Arjuna, yeah. Let's read verse 15. Lord Krishna blew his conch shell called Panchajanya. Arjuna blew his, the Devadatta. And Bhima, the voracious eater and performer of Herculean tasks, blew his terrific conch shell called Paundra. Yes. So Prabhupada makes some more comments here, some more extensive comments in the purport of this now verse 15. First of all, Krishna is addressed as Rishikesh here. And Rishikesh, yeah. This is an interesting point, and it's an important point also, that at different places in Bhagavad Gita, and just, here and there, in the Bhagavatam too, but here we're talking about Bhagavad Gita in different places, Lord Krishna is addressed with different names. And each time there are significances, there's some significance why at that particular point, under those particular circumstances, he's been addressed by that name. In this case here, he's been addressed as Rishikesh, Rishika Isha. Rishika meaning the senses, and Isha meaning the controller or the master, or even the owner, actually, the proprietor. Yes. And Prabhupada makes the point right at the beginning of the purport. Krishna is referred to as Rishikesh in this verse because he's the owner of all senses. The living entities are part and parcel of him, and therefore the senses of the living entities are also part and parcel of his senses. So this indicates that Lord Krishna, as the master of all the senses, well, actually Prabhupada makes the point just a sentence or so further on. The Lord, situated in the hearts of all living entities, directs their senses, but he directs in terms of the surrender of the living entity. And in the case of a pure devotee, he directly controls the senses. So Prabhupada goes on to discuss like this. So here on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Lord Krishna is going to really directly control and direct the senses of Arjuna and various others there, but here Arjuna's mentioned, so that they are victorious in the battle, of course. So the Lord is being addressed there by that name, and not just Krishna, because of the circumstances, the particular situation. Like in Bhagavad Gita, whenever Lord Krishna starts to speak, every time, anyway, maybe every time, pretty much every time, Vyasadeva, the compiler, says, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. You never find Sri Krishna Uvacha. There's not one. There's not one. As I recall, it's only Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, because Krishna is like a common popular name. So many people have the name Krishna. Whereas Bhagavan is a title. It's a title. The possessor of all opulences is something more like a title like president or prime minister, something of that sort, than Krishna. which is generally just a personal name. So therefore, Vyasadeva used Sri Bhagavan just to draw attention, the people's attention, to the fact that this is actually the Supreme Lord speaking, and not just Sri Krishna Uvacha. I'm sure some of you have heard me mention, it's a nice little story. I was in Mauritius 2 or 3 years ago, just arrived, came to the house, some devotees were there, and there was one young man there, young devotee man, and I asked him, "What's your name?" And he said, "Krishna." And just jokingly I said, "Oh, I've been looking for you for years." But he wasn't that Krishna. No, this one. He was one of the other ones. All right. So anyway, Prabhupada, we're still in the same first paragraph. Srila Prabhupada goes on to discuss this point about using different names under different circumstances. And there's sort of, you could say, a list of at least a few of the different names which he uses or is addressed by when certain circumstances are there. Madhusudana, he killed the demon Madhu. Govinda gives pleasure to the cows and senses. Vasudev, because he appeared as the son of Vasudev. Vasudev with a long A. So they blew their conches, and it was really, the effect was pretty amazing. Let's go on to verses 16 to 18 together. King Yudhisthira, the son of Kunti, blew his conch shell, the Ananta Vijay, and Nakula and Sahadev blew the Sughosh and Manipushpak. That great archer, the king of Kashi, the great fighter, Shikandi, Drishtadyumna, Virat, the unconquerable Satyaki, Drupada, the sons of Draupadi, and others, O king, such as the mighty-armed son of Subhadra, all blew their respective conch shells. And let's have a little look at the purport here, just a short purport. So, Prabhupada makes the point in the purport, Sanjay, by speaking in this way, informed King Dhritarashtra very tactfully that his unwise policy of deceiving the sons of Pandu and endeavoring to enthrone his own sons on the seat of the kingdom was not very laudable. The signs already indicated that the whole Kuru dynasty would be killed in that great battle. Yes. So, Srila Baladev Vijabhushan says that, O Dhritarashtra, Lord of the earth, because he's referred to as Prithvipati, which means the Lord of the planet, earth. Lord of the earth, Prithvipati, your bad advice has brought about this calamity in the form of the destruction of the dynasty. That is the suggestion of addressing the king as Lord of the earth. Interesting. And here we have, I mentioned last night how right at the beginning of Mahabharata, right in the first chapter, the scene is that the battle has finished and Dhritarashtra has lost everything completely lost everything. And so he speaks to Sanjay there, the same Sanjay, Sanjaya, and tells him how, when different things happened as the time was going along before the battle, when different things happened, he understood, oh, this indicates we're going to lose everything. I'll just read a few of these things. Let's see. When I heard that Subhadra, after being forcibly seized, had been married to Arjuna in Dwaraka, and that Krishna and Balaram, without resenting it, had entered Indraprastha as friends, then, O Sanjay, I understood I had no hope of success. What he says, it's kind of funny, actually. He's speaking to Sanjay before he starts mentioning all these different things. He says, when you have heard what I have to say, and you recollect what I've said after I've said it, then you'll know me as a person who has a prophetic eye. It's so sad and pathetic, you know. Yeah, I knew then. Well, why didn't you do anything? All right. When I heard that Arjuna, with his celestial arrow, preventing the downpour by Indra, the king of gods, had pleased Agni by giving him the forest of Khandava, then, O Sanjay, I knew I had no hope of success. When I heard that the 5 Pandavas with their mother Kunti had escaped from the house of lack, and that Vidura was engaged in helping them in their designs, then, O Sanjay, I knew I had no hope of success. When I heard that Arjuna, after having pierced the mark in the arena, had won Draupadi, then, O Sanjaya, I knew I had no hope of success. When I heard that Jarasandha, the foremost of the royal line of Magadha, blazing in the midst of the Kshatriyas, had been slain by Bhima with his bare arms alone, then, O Sanjay, I knew I had no hope of success. When I heard that in their general campaign, the sons of Pandu had conquered the chiefs of the land and performed the grand sacrifice of the Rajasuya, then, O Sanjay, I knew I had no hope of success. And he goes on and on and on and on with all these, quote unquote, prophetic points. So, yes, so there was no heartbreaking on the part of the Pandavas. Oh, sorry, we've gone on to 19. Let's go on to 19. The blowing of these different conch shells became uproarious, vibrating both in the sky and on the earth. It shattered the hearts of the sons of Dhritarashtra. So Prabhupada mentions there was no heartbreaking on the part of the Pandavas when they heard that side, the Kauravas, the first ones who blew the conch shells, when they heard those conch shells. And it just shows that Prabhupada says, one who takes shelter of the Supreme Lord has nothing to fear, even in the midst of the greatest calamity. And Prabhupada, in one of those other lectures, it's a really nice point. The Pandavas were placed in so many distressing conditions, but they never faltered. They never asked Krishna, "My dear Krishna, you're our friend. Why are we undergoing so many severe difficulties?" They were confident that, in spite of all these difficulties, we shall come out victorious because Krishna is there. This confidence is called Sharanagati, surrender. There are 6 points of surrender unto Krishna. One point of surrender is to believe that Krishna will protect me. Just like a small child has full faith in his mother. My mother is here. There's no danger. Confident. I've seen it. I'll narrate one practical example. In Calcutta, in my younger days, I was traveling in a tram, and my youngest son was with me. He was only 2.5 years old. So the conductor, by way of a joke, asked him, "Give me your fare." So the boy first of all said, "I have no money." So the conductor said, "Then you get down." Then the boy immediately said, "Oh, here is my father. You cannot ask me to get down. My father is here." You see, so this is the psychology. If you have approached Krishna, then even the greatest fear will not agitate you. So now the next verse 20 is the last verse in this section. Well, let me just read it. I'll just read it. At that time, well, interestingly enough, Krishna is addressed again as Rishikesh in this verse also. At that time, Arjuna, the son of Pandu, seated in the chariot bearing the flag marked with Hanuman, took up his bow and prepared to shoot his arrows. O king, after looking at the sons of Dhritarashtra drawn in military array, Arjuna then spoke to Lord Krishna these words. So Prabhupada really gets into it in the purport. It's a great purport. It's just a wonderful purport. That the emblem of Hanuman on the flag of Arjuna is another sign of victory, because Hanuman cooperated with Lord Ram in the battle between Ram and Ravan, and Lord Ram emerged victorious. Now both Ram and Hanuman were present on the chariot of Arjuna to help him. Lord Krishna is Ram himself, and wherever Lord Ram is, his eternal servitor Hanuman and his eternal consort Sita, the goddess of fortune, are present. Therefore Arjuna had no cause to fear any enemies whatsoever. And above all, the Lord of the senses, Lord Krishna, was personally present to give him direction. Thus all good counsel was available to Arjuna in the matter of executing the battle, in such auspicious conditions, arranged by the Lord for his eternal devotee, lay the signs of assured victory. And elsewhere Prabhupada says, Vaishnavism is like that. Mahajano yena gata sapanta. Vaishnav should follow his previous Mahajan authority. Arjuna is fighting for Krishna. He is following the previous fighting Acharya, Hanumanji. Therefore, he has depicted his flag with Hanuman, that Hanuman kindly help me. This is Vaishnavism. I have come to fight for Lord Krishna. You fought also for the Lord. Kindly help me. This is the idea. Kindly help me. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. The The Vaishnava is always thinking himself helpless, and begging help from the previous Acharya. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.